Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wolverine podcast. Anthony Broom here with Clayton Safey and Chris Ballas on Monday, June 30th. And if I stop for a second to say, Sherrone Moore just tweeted out another pair of eyeball emojis, would you believe me or would you think it was a joke? Because I don't know how many there have been lately. Michigan is on fire on the recruiting trail. We're going to talk about that more from a state of the program perspective. We don't want to step on the toes of our recruiting guys who do a wonderful job, but want to kind of take a moment here in June to look at the state of the program, hit on a couple other things, and then we will do a Q&A, and that'll be it for Monday. But fellas, welcome back in.
Great to be here, man. And I'm telling you what, 4th of July week and all the stuff going on is recruiting stuff for the most part. There's not a whole lot of football talk, but man, that is keeping the site going right now. Those guys are doing a great job, the recruiting guys, and stay tuned. That's all I can say. There are more to come. And I think we're about 4 pairs of eyeballs behind, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 3. But there are more commitments coming. These guys have been all over it. It's been as fun a time recruiting as I can remember in recent memory in terms of the excitement and the level of recruit that they're getting. These are big-time recruits, guys, and that's what you need to compete.
Do I believe you? Do I not believe you? I looked at my phone when you said that, so kind of. Yeah, this is the best recruiting I've seen from Michigan since last November. And that's under this staff as well. This team, from Sean McGee to Sherrone Moore to the assistant coaches is absolutely killing it right now. And the NIL collective and the organization under the new, revenue sharing and the House settlement, the alignment there has been fantastic. So it's been really fun to watch. And like you said, Anthony, I mean, the eyeball emojis from Sherrone Moore, those are becoming famous now. And commitments dropping at least a couple a day, it seems like, at this point.
Yeah, so I do think the canon answer is we are, I think, 4 of them behind at the moment. So we'll see what happens from there. Could be some more good news.
What does that mean for people that don't know?
So for people not familiar with it, when Michigan is on commit watch of late, or a guy has verbally pledged to Michigan, whether it be behind the scenes, publicly, typically what we get first in terms of being tipped off, and it's not always the case because, EJ and Ethan will know when guys are going to commit, but of late, Sherrone Moore will tweet out the eyeballs emoji. It's with yes, sir, and I believe a hashtag go blue. And that's kind of like, that's the equivalent of the white smoke coming out of the Vatican, right? Where someone has dropped. Something is imminent. So there was a point last week, and if I'm speaking out of turn, please feel free to correct me, where I think there were just 7 of those out there unanswered, and one tweet had 2 eyeball emojis. So it's kind of become a cipher now too. And I have noticed a pattern. So if you want to know who or what the position group is, you usually get the Sherrone Moore eyeballs tweet first, and then the position coach will tweet out a GIF, and they've all got their own little catchphrases too. So
Lou Esposito is Tony Soprano at this point. That's his GIF. It's incredible.
It's fun. You look at this town. Let's just start with this. Where Michigan stands right now, they have the number 10 class in the 2026 cycle. That's only going to go up. It seems like if some of the announcements that are rumored are imminent, so to speak, over the next week or so. You're stacking that on top of a class that last year, headlined by Bryce Underwood, you finished 6th in the country, and you've got Underwood was a 5-star. Andrew Babalola was a 5-star. They had, I believe, 7 top 100 guys they signed last year. And, recruiting is an inexact, it's not a science. It's actually just more taking on lotto tickets. But in order to get to where Michigan was 2 years ago, where they were for that 3-year run, you have to stack talent. You have to develop talent too. At the end of the day, if you're bringing in these top classes, but they're not developing or performing on the field, it's all for naught. But what we've seen is that if you want to be a team that competes for and wins a national championship, those guys that you bring in 3 years from now need to be NFL draft picks, and a decent amount of them being drafted fairly high. And it seems like this staff around Sherrone Moore, and we'll give Sean McGee his flowers too. I think he's doing a tremendous job as their GM, as kind of the organizational the front office lead, the liaison between the donors, the collectives, the coaching staff. They are well positioned, and we knew this was going to be the case coming out of the Jim Harbaugh era. It was going to have to look different, and you were going to have to, you weren't just going to be able to run it back with a different guy in the lead chair. And that message has been received and then some by the powers that be at Michigan.
Yeah, the best part about this, not the best part, but one of the added benefits here is watching all of the rivals, right? There are literally four of them, really, if you think about Penn State, and if you add Penn State to the equation, the fan bases and how they are coping with this. Well, either the hammer's going to fall and this whole class is going to disintegrate, or this is ridiculous that the NCAA hasn't done anything about the worst scandal in history, blah, 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 and Michigan is not able just to exist, but to thrive in this climate. It's been kind of funny to see how they're coping with it, and it's not very well. So they are hating us right now on different websites and in several networks, which is great. It means you're doing something right. What does Clay always say about booing people?
They don't boo nobodies.
They don't boo nobodies, and Michigan is not a nobody. Somebody actually on an Ohio State board said, "Oh my God, why would anybody want to go there?" And I think it was Steve Wiltfong or somebody that said, "Well, these guys did just win the national championship 2 years ago and that win 3 straight Big Ten titles and have plenty to offer as a football program. Clearly, is the all-time winningest program. Michigan has tons to offer, and they aren't going away, guys. Sorry, I hate to tell people that, but the way they're recruiting right now, as long as they coach them up, and we saw last year with the way they rebounded at the end of the year, right? There are good signs, positive signs. You can't tell after 1 year, good or bad, how something is going to be, but a lot of that culture we hope stays in place, and you're seeing right now the results of everybody saying, well, you just, if you're buying recruits, it's just who's paying more. It's not that way. As we mentioned last week, it was Michigan basketball saying, people close to the program saying, no, we aren't number one in the Big Ten in terms of money that we spend. You still have to recruit, guys. You still have to build these relationships and lock these kids down against other programs that have a ton of money. As one Michigan coach told me, he said, everybody's got money. You still have to go out there and recruit. And right now you're just recruiting against the people who have as much money as you or that want to spend more money than you. So they're doing something right here. Sherrone Moore was always and has always been a great recruiter. Looks like he's got some others on staff too that can do it.
I was going to say, I prefer a Rick and Morty quote where Rick says, your boos mean nothing to me because I've seen what makes you cheer. So
yes, exactly.
That's the one I'll go to. Go ahead, Clay.
I love that. No, I was just gonna say that the thing that is encouraging to me is, yes, Michigan did just win the national championship in 3 straight Big Ten titles, but that was a completely different staff, and this staff has been able to, recruit at a high level despite that. Only a couple coaches left over, including Sherrone Moore, but he's in a different role. Really, all the guys back are in different roles, and a new general manager. Didn't have one before that, so. It's this staff. They're not just relying on the past. They are actually, showing that they can compete in the here and now. And think back to what I said just a couple minutes ago with, how well they recruited last November to finish the 2025 class off. That was under a new set of rules, or that was under a different set of rules than they're operating under now. And in the last month, they've risen from about 50 or so in the country in national recruiting rankings, which don't matter really until the cycle's over, but still gives you a snapshot for a moment in time, all the way to number 10 with, the new set of rules that are in place here with the House settlement. So those 3 things give you a lot of hope. I think that they're going to continue to cultivate a lot of talent, and that's just a prerequisite for having success. You have to check that box, but there are others they need to check and things they need to prove. But as far as June goes, when pretty much all you can do is recruit and do things, kind of behind the scenes, the players are working out all that, but the coaching staff, they're doing exactly what they should be doing, and they're red hot on the recruiting trail.
I think part of it too is I don't buy in the here now. I don't take the, well, you bought this player, that whole argument. I don't take it seriously anymore, because to land any premium talent now, you are going to have to pay. You're going to have to step up. And what I like about what Michigan's done, and I tweeted this out the other day, is that, they are using this war chest that they have accumulated to attack premium positions on the field. They did it with Bryce Underwood, the most important position on the field. I think they've done a really nice job it's still in progress with rebuilding this offensive line through some of the guys that brought in last year and some of the guys that they will bring in this class. And, that's a group that you're not going to see the fruits of the labor there for a bit unless you have a special guy. But, quarterback, offensive line, they've got a 5-star edge now in Carter Meadows in this 2026 class. They brought in a top 40 guy in the last class in Nate Marshall. So the things that are kind of tied into what Michigan's identity has been, especially of late, when they showed that you can win the way that Michigan did a couple of years ago, is you're looking to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. And you have, in most games, you have the best quarterback that's on the field and a guy who could be a potential first-round pick. And that recipe works for me. I mean, these are, you can go build a fantasy football team like Ohio State has, like, the Alabamas of the world are right now, but you got to have it where it matters. And I think Michigan is doing a really good job bringing in premium players at places that fit their identity.
Yeah, and the defensive line, and I wrote a column about this today, or an article, is where Michigan used to get beat by better athletes, right? From whether it's SEC or USC or somebody like that. They were right here, and the next level. The reason that the Ohio States, or not really the Ohio States, but back then it was really the SEC teams were a little bit better, is because they had better defensive lines. They had quicker, better athletes on defensive line, bigger, stronger, and now Michigan is there, and you're seeing them getting guys like Meadows. You look at Mason Graham, was an under the radar kid who just happened to be one of the best defensive linemen to ever play here. Kenneth Grant, though, is a kind of guy that runs like the wind and is 350 pounds. Those are freaks, unicorns, as Jim Harbaugh used to say. And they're defensive ends. Right now, they feel they are six deep on the defensive line. And on the interior, they think they're 4 deep on the edges. And it's only getting better. And kids are seeing this. And speaking with an agent recently, they said, kids see this. They want to go to Michigan. They want to be developed. They want to play in the league. They want to eat. And guess what? These guys are doing it. I think we're going to see a big year for Derek Moore this year. I think TJ Guy is going to have a breakout season. He was my choice for breakout defensive player of the year, kind of waiting his turn. So it's fun to watch. I love that. There is nothing better, guys, than watching you just suck the life out of somebody in the fourth quarter by wearing them down on the offensive line, just beating them to a pulp, and to the point where they're, as Doug Skeen, my podcast partner, says, they want to quit. And then watching a line being helpless as you get to their quarterback again and again and again and change the game like they did against Washington. There were 4 or 5 plays there that absolutely changed that game, and a lot of them by defensive linemen. So that's what I love about it. They get it. They understand it, and now they've got the resources to land these guys. They are right up there with premium corners and, guys like Bryce Underwood in terms of how much it costs to land them, but they are sparing no expense here and building great relationships with these guys.
Yeah, and if you think of, there was a lull there especially at the defensive tackle spot late in Don Brown's career at Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And from the time that Michigan played Alabama on January 1, 2020, in which Jess Spate started that game, and no offense to him, but, he's a former, or was a walk-on who, if you see him now around, he's like 190 pounds or something like that, starting at defensive tackle, to the time they played Alabama, January 1 of 2024, the defensive tackle position was the most improved on the Michigan football team. And they lose 2 really good ones coming out of this past season who dominated the game against Ohio State and others this past season. USC comes to mind as well. And the things those guys did in the prior years. But now you're adding to that with some really good recruits on the defensive line, but the edge spot as well, which is really important. Is your offensive line, you want to wear down the other team, and you want to not be able to get worn down on defense, and continue to put licks on the quarterback and shake their confidence early, and then just keep coming at them as the game goes on. So defensive line, it does stand out. It feels like Lou Esposito, and I know there are some sites that track this. He's got to be one of the better recruiters in the country. I think it was a blessing that Michigan ended up with him last spring, I think a couple days into spring practice, where he didn't even know. I'm sure he had seen a lot of them on film, but he'd had no relationships with these players that he coached last season coming in, and they were already into spring ball. And then just to think what he's done in just over a calendar year, not only helping develop some of these guys, but also recruiting at the level he is. So it's been really impressive to watch that position group, but others. Lamar Morgan has been an outstanding recruiter so far at the defensive back spot, and they didn't recruit very well at that position for a few years before he got here, but now they got all the resources to do so. So just a ton of talent coming in, and we'll see if they sign everybody, but I'm sure as many guys that flip away will probably flip towards Michigan from other schools too. That's just the nature of this. It gets really chaotic come December and signing day, but for the time being, they got a good class so far that is, they're nowhere near done in terms of getting these commitments.
Yeah, and I wanted to sort of parlay this into, the state of the program conversation. Some of the key areas that Sherrone Moore, a little more than a year into this. Now, we all know the circumstances by which he came in. It was, 17 days after Michigan won the national title, and then Jim Harbaugh leaves and most of the staff leaves, and then he hires a staff. Then he has to replace a guy on staff, and then there was the Denard Robinson thing. It was just a lot that was thrown at him and at this team. And as much as we'd like to flush it, 5-5 was still a big kind of concern that I think lingers into this next season. Like, they have to win. Like, they've stabilized a lot of key areas. This is a year where, I think that Sherrone Moore has, if you can survive, I'm sure in time there will be more stories and such that comes out. And I'm not looking to shed a light on any of these things, but I just don't think morale was very high in that 5-5 start. And to those guys' credit, they played hard. They never gave up. They always played to the whistle, played to the end of games, but they just weren't good enough. They played an entire season without an offense, but you don't want to put all of this on Bryce Underwood before he even plays a game, but this thing kind of flips when that bolt of lightning hit during that second bye week. And that's, that was the start of 3 straight wins. That was the start of flipping, as Clayton just said, flipping some other recruits late and finishing strong with the class. You beat Ohio State, you beat Alabama, which I don't care what either of those fan bases think. Those aren't flukes. You were 3 touchdown favorites in each of those games. And then Michigan came out and punched you in the mouth and dragged you down to their level. And, to use the old Dan Campbell adage, took a kneecap out of you and drug you into the deep water, so to speak. So that they survived that and have not only just survived it, but you come out of that season with this type of momentum now to where, it's very, we'll see if they get there, but it's within the range of outcomes that this group, albeit young, albeit with a freshman likely to start at quarterback, the path is there for them to be in the playoff in year 2. And for as much as the rivalry fodder, especially from, the idiots south of the state line who lost again for the 4th year in a row, they'll still say, oh, well, you went 7-5. You didn't make the playoff. That was your year to get them. And this thing just seems like it's going to keep growing.
Yeah, that's the thing. Now you get them back at home and you're in their heads. They can say whatever they want, but you're in their heads. There's no reason that Michigan should have won that game last year. And clearly there's a mental aspect to it, just like in the John Cooper years before you guys were even born, or right about the time you guys were born. So that's what is so fun about it. You come in expecting to win that game. I remember seeing the view of these guys coming onto the field, and they looked confident as hell. I think wasn't it Isaiah? It was, or one of our competitors had it on there where they showed these guys getting ready to come out of the tunnel into the sea of red, and none of them flinched. They came out there and acted like they expected to win that game, and that's exactly what happened. Now you come back here, and to end a streak, you've got to win on the road, which is really, really hard to do, fellas. Really hard to do. So especially because you've got a young team that, in my opinion, is going to be playing its best ball by the end of the year, when some of these guys like an Andrew Babalola, who might be starting at left tackle, has 11 games under his belt, right? When Bryce Underwood's going to have 11 games under his belt, most likely at quarterback. So to me, I never fast forward through a football season. There are some games, obviously, that mean more than others, but I can't wait to get to that one because there's just nothing like it in all of sports. But there are 4 games, guys, that are going to determine whether this team is a playoff team, to Anthony's point, and it's going to be at Oklahoma, at Nebraska, at USC, and Ohio State, in my opinion. You split those 4, you're in the playoff. You win 3, and you got a shot, depending on how they go. So it is there for the taking. But win or lose, people close to the program say next year is the year that we really believe that we are going to be competing heavily for national championships here again. So, there was a hiccup last year. You kind of expect that with the coaching change and with all the talent they lost. But the way they finished, credit to Sherrone Moore, they've got the momentum going into next year, this coming season. I don't see any other games on there, guys, that scare me, with the exception maybe of Washington. I think Clay has mentioned that he thinks they'll be a little bit better than expected as well. I think that's true. And then always Maryland on the road, even though they're not very good. For some reason, that always seems to be a tougher game, but I don't see them losing either of those. I really expect it's going to come down to those 4 games, and it wouldn't stun me at all if they split them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maryland, to me, post Talia Tagovailoa is like a completely different entity, because they were always dangerous, given they had a quarterback, and they always seem to get good receivers. I think they still have a couple good ones. I think Washington might be the Maryland and they're more talented across the board, but where I really like their quarterback, and I really like Denzel Boston, their receiver, and Jonah Coleman, their running back, and I actually like both of their play callers in terms of how successful they've been. So that could be a trouble one, and you never know when you look at that schedule who's actually going to be good and who's not. It's tough to judge in the summer. The season starts, and next thing you know, some team's in trouble against an FCS opponent, and it's like, oh shoot, okay, that's not going to be his stuff. I mean, come into 2021 season, and Washington looked like a pretty tall task, and then they lose to Montana the week before they came to Michigan. So that's just one example of how things can change real quick in some of these seasons. Or a team like Oregon last year struggled in their first 2 games, Idaho and Boise State, and then figured it out and ended up winning the Big Ten. So you can even see it develop throughout the course of a season. But the Ohio State part of this, I think if you're a Michigan fan, you're hoping that last year was kind of what Ohio State went through in 2011 when they had an interim head coach. We're kind of down, even though they had a ton of talent, because they won a ton in 2010. They won a lot in 2012, even though they couldn't go to a bowl, I think undefeated that year. But in between, it just wasn't quite right. They had Luke Fickell as their interim coach. Michigan beats them, took advantage of it. Last year, Ohio State couldn't take advantage of Michigan being down, a 6-win team coming into Columbus. And the hope is for Michigan fans that, all right, you played them, close there. We're able to gut out a win. Now you're back on track potentially this season. You get them at home, and you can continue to dominate the rivalry. You're not going to win every game for the rest of the time. So at some point, Ohio State is going to beat Michigan, even though I think it was horse and buggies were still around last time Ohio State beat Michigan. But
so we were still wearing masks. Or no, we weren't even wearing masks yet. That was pre-COVID.
No one even.
You can't convince me they wouldn't have won the COVID year. Once they won last year, I'm like, of course Dan Villari and Michael Barrett running the Wildcat could have got it done.
Absolutely.
Like, you can't convince me otherwise.
All those guys. But yeah, so if Ohio State didn't beat them last year, when we're walking into that stadium and it was like a celebration around those tailgates that they thought they'd already won. Look at Jack Sawyer's face before the game. After the game, he was crying, but before the game, the way he took his helmet off and was taunting the Michigan players as they went back into the locker room for the last time before the game. To think of like just what he was thinking in that moment is like they had it no matter what. There was no way they were going to lose that game, and sure enough, they did. So the Ohio State part of it is really interesting, but to me, this season starts with the Oklahoma game. If you can win that, even if you do have some bumps in the road in the middle of the year, the schedule looks pretty good in terms of being able to kind of get back on track late October, early November. You have a second bye in there, and then you have Ohio State at home at the end of the year. So the team you are at the beginning is not going to be the team you are at the end. As long as you stay healthy, you should be better, especially with young talent at quarterback, things like that. But you also have to be ready at the beginning because the Oklahoma game is going to be huge, and they're another team that is kind of like Michigan. They could go either way here. They could be very good, compete for the SEC, or kind of be what they have been the last few years, which has been disappointing. 2 years under 500 for Oklahoma. They hadn't been under 500 before this last stretch since 1998. So they're a wild card team, but that game is going to be huge to determining what kind of cushion you have the rest of the way because you do have one now with the playoff, as much as it sucks to lose games. And then, the last one is going to define everything if you give yourself a shot.
Well, as someone who has rooted for a team and been personally victimized by the Matt Patricia defense, I'm sorry. I mean, not to spoil anything, like I picked Michigan to beat Ohio State in our football preview. That should start mailing out hopefully the next week or so. So look for that in your mailboxes. When it comes down to coordinators, I like Michigan's brain trust a lot more. I like Wink Martindale in a chess match with Ryan Day and Brian Hartline. And I'll take Chip Lindsey in a chess match over Matt Patricia, who in his career has been poisonous to pretty much every locker room he's been in that didn't have Tom Brady in it.
Great hire, Buckeyes. I love it.
So that'll be interesting. There is the storylines are aplenty. I guess any other thoughts on where this football program is at right now? I again, the playoff is very within reach this year. I think if you can get to the playoff, it's a great season. I think you can have a good season without getting to the playoff, but I think you got to win 9 games.
I think it's a big year. Yeah, it's a big year. You got to make strides. The Ohio State game was great last year and changed the narrative, just like Alabama, right? If he loses that game, that Ohio State game, Sherrone Moore's not getting the standing O's. And, people are going to be looking at him like, boy, this is a huge year for him. It's still a big year. You got to get over there. You got to beat Michigan State on the road, which I think they will. You got to be like a 9-3. And then next year, if you don't make the playoff, because there are people right now saying, well, it's a complete failure if they don't make the playoff with this schedule. It's hard, guys. It is hard to win college football games, and you've got a lot of youth and you have some question marks. So they're still kind of rebuilding under Sherrone Moore after losing all those guys. And but they do have to make strides. And I think they will. I think Bryce Underwood, they're going to roll with him. I don't think they're going to really have a choice, frankly. I think that Mikey Keene's getting better, but he's not where he needs to be. So that puts Underwood way ahead. And I think that he's got obviously a much higher ceiling, and there are more things you can do with him. So it's going to come down to that offensive line. Again, they're going to run the ball a ton. But to me, this team needs to show some improvement. Get there to 9-3, beat the rivals. Would love to see them beat Ohio State again. You don't know. That's a 50-50 game. And then build for next year when I think they really start competing for titles.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on Sherrone Moore coming into the season. And, I think there would be a lot more if they didn't win games at the end of the season, win 3 straight. They were heading into senior day without a 6th win that would guarantee them bowl eligibility. Then they get it. And on the week that they landed Bryce Underwood and they finished the recruiting class strong and won against Ohio State and Alabama. And that's encouraging because you can, they showed they improved throughout the year. That defense by the end of the season was one of the best I've ever seen. And you can't really say that in terms of an entire season because you have to put a full season together to be in that category. But as far as performances go, I mean, against Ohio State might be the best I've ever seen. And then the Alabama game with a different cast of characters out there was incredible as well. And I think Wink Martindale, having gone up against Lamar Jackson in practice a lot, probably had something to do with it. It's like, wait, Milroe's nowhere near the guy I saw in Baltimore all the time. I don't care who's on the field. Like, we're going to figure out a way to stop this. We're going to also look at what we did a year ago when it was Minter, calling the shots and how we stopped them. And they were able to do it. So it felt like from a defensive standpoint, they came together. From Sherrone Moore's standpoint, he figured out how to win games without an offense. And in recruiting and transfer portal, they've fixed some of the issues on offense and hiring Chip Lindsey as well. So, those things lead you to believe that there can be improvement here, but they still have to go out and do it. And the schedule looks less daunting than it did last year. But again, you don't know what these teams are really going to be until the season starts or until you play them, what they are coming into that week. So that's what makes it interesting. And then, you don't want to, as much as 2026 is kind of the year that you point to and maybe that in 27, given the timeline with Bryce Underwood, some of these other high-end recruits, and the fact that you're organized enough to get high-level guys out of the transfer portal, like you don't want to waste another year in a way or kind of leave more doubts coming out of a season. So in that respect, it's a big year. And if you can make the playoff next year, then I think you feel really, really comfortable about your chances to do so the next couple. And then it really gets fun from there.
Yeah. I've heard a teacher say this before where they should say, like, when you criticize someone or when you get criticized, don't ever feel bad about something that you can't fix tomorrow. So if you lose a game because of a self-inflicted error or a bad coaching mistake, that's something you can criticize. But if you come out of the season saying, well, gosh, they didn't have a first or a second round pick at wide receiver, or they didn't have a premium offensive tackle. Well, those are things that I don't think they can address this year. So that's not something I'm going to criticize in the here. Like, that's something you give that time to percolate before you make comments like that. But it's a big year, and we won't go too much into this. But be remiss if you didn't mention that Sherrone Moore is probably going to serve some sort of suspension this year too. So depending on the length of that and when it comes and where it happens, especially when you have, I think, the 3 toughest road games that you play this season, all in that first 6 weeks of the year, that's something that could affect this year's, what the ceiling of this year's team is.
Yeah, especially if he's not going to be helping prepare the game plans, which he's not when that happens. So we'll see if it's game 3 and 4 like Michigan has proposed, or if it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. I really think it'll be 3 or 4 games, fellas. We'll find out, but we'll find out probably in August. So I know that they'll have a backup plan. And yeah, going to Oklahoma without Sherrone Moore is not ideal, would not be ideal. But there are some smart guys in that building too. We've seen several interim coaches here do pretty well in such games. And either way, we'll be happy to put that behind us as well.
Yeah, which is utterly ridiculous that he would get suspended for turning over text messages he turned them over, and it's an overblown, investigation anyway. It's a nothing burger of even a scandal. So it's insane like that could happen. And they've changed the rule now where, he can't be there during the week if he's suspended. So I think you hope that doesn't happen, that maybe, it remains 2, but it's scary to think about not having your head coach for a month of a season, not just 4 days of that month, literally an entire month. That would be extremely detrimental to a season.
It is. And it's a situation too where I just think whatever form it takes, whether it's 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, God forbid it's 6, half the season, that whatever it takes for that to be done, that's going to, I think that's a weight off this program's shoulders too. And, again, it's different than self-imposing recruiting, an entire month of recruiting and being on the road. But, if we've seen anything, it's that whenever this staff has been dealt a rough hand, whether it has to do with stuff that's happening internally or investigations or whatever, come out the other side of that and you have a month like you are on the recruiting trail right now. So maybe you survive all that and you set yourself up for, I think regardless, that second half of the season sets up as kind of a bit of a launching pad into the postseason if you're fortunate enough to be in the mix there. But any other thoughts on where we're at as of June 30th? I know they just announced today who's going to be at Big Ten Media Days. It'll be Max Bredesen, Ernest Hausman, and Derek Moore. So that's kind of like a little breadcrumb that football is closer than we expect. It'll be here before we know it. But on June 30th, it's been a pretty productive month for maybe not the 2025 Wolverines, but certainly the 2026, 2027 and beyond Wolverines.
Yeah, 3 weeks till the Big Ten meetings. I'm excited to talk to them. Always one of the best days of the year in terms of kicking off the football season in Vegas. So 50-50 chance we make it back in one piece, but we hope to be here for the season. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, those would be a different group of guys here doing a podcast, and we'll still be in Vegas. I may never come back.
Why not? Yeah.
But
if I go, I'm taking the red eye out and getting the hell out of there.
It's not a bad call.
Yeah.
But no, it's exciting. I think today's 61 days until the start of the season. Graham Glasgow days until Michigan football and a whole bunch of other great Wolverines that wore that number. But it is. And Max Bredesen, he's making 44 as famous as possible. 2-time Big Ten Media Day attendee once he hits Vegas, and hopefully he makes it back. But I think it's just the intimidation factor, right? You send 44 because he's going to have the rest of these players squirming. I know Ohio State, I think they're the first day. I know Michigan is the last day. Thursday of that week goes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because you have so many teams, and of course you put it in Vegas because that makes sense for the Big Ten. But he's the most intimidating guy in the building. Ernest Hausman, not far behind. Derek Moore, really not far behind either. So, it's classic Michigan, right? You're sending a fullback, a linebacker, and a defensive lineman, and 3 great representatives. Of course, you have some really talented players people would love to talk to that we haven't got the chance to yet, that will get their opportunity when they're older. But these guys are a good trio, plus Sherrone Moore.
Do you think someone's going to ask Sherrone Moore why he didn't bring Bryce Underwood?
Of course.
Some Ohio State.
That one year, how could you not bring your starting quarterback, J.J. McCarthy? They must not like him. They must not think he's a leader, blah, 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 when in fact he was one of the best leaders in the room. Hilarious. Everybody's looking for an angle, and when you're young like that, you're stupid, and you ask dumb questions. That's just the way it goes.
Was that Jimmy Watkins or something like that?
Something. Jimmy doesn't ask bad questions. But Jimmy certainly did. Certainly did. Yep.
I wasn't going to name the guy, but all right. Let's get into our questions. The Wolverine loves questions, so we'll take questions. The first one is from Stephen Lindsay, who says, what do you think the rotation looks like in basketball by the start and also by the tournament?
Basketball is going to be elite. This team is loaded, right? It's funny because with the freshmen, in past years we've seen, well, how much are the freshmen going to be able to help? Trey McKinney's going to be playing a lot right away from what we hear, but Yaxel Lendeborg, Morez Johnson, go right down the list, guys. They're 10, 11 deep here. I have no doubt that this is going to be a very, very good team, unless there's some kind of chemistry problem that we don't foresee. I don't anticipate that under any Dusty May teams. So I believe this is a Big Ten favorite and a national championship contender. And I don't think that's embellishing anything, fellas. I think this is one of the most talented teams in the country.
Without going through every single spot, I feel like the ones that are most interesting are point guard, where you have Elliot Cadeau, who's going to play the majority of the minutes, and then kind of piece it together backup wise. LJ Kaysen, probably the next closest thing to a true point guard that you have in the roster, although he's more of a combo guard. He'll see some time there. Roddy Gale, they say, can bring up the ball, and did that at the end of last season as well. And as Akeem Miskadeen put it last week, whoever gets a rebound can bring it up, and then he started laughing, except Adai Mara at 7'3". But the other guys can rip it and go, and they want an athletic team that can play fast, and the other guys are running down the floor. There's no reason why Elliot Cadeau can't head to the corner once Yaxel Lendeborg gets a rebound and spot up. So that'll allow them to play pretty fast. Although when Cadeau has it in his hands, I don't think there's going to be anyone on the floor from watching him at North Carolina faster than Elliot Cadeau. But you have kind of a logjam of guys at the 2 and 3, Roddy Gale, Trey McKinney, Winters Grady, Namari Burnett, all in the mix for playing time. And then the front court, is going to be a challenge to see time if you're Will Cheddar and Oscar Goodman. Will Cheddar is going to play a good amount. He's one of the better shooters on this team. But if you're Oscar Goodman, there'll be somewhat of a challenge here early on in his career. He's got a lot of eligibility left. Center, probably a 50-50 split or so, whether it's 25-15 in terms of minutes, or you see a little overlap when you go really, really big. Because Yaxel said that when he talked to us last week that Dusty's planning on playing him at the 3 a little bit. So that implies you're going to see at least, one of Cheddar, Morez, Adai, all kind of playing next to each other. But speaking of Morez Johnson, I'm at a bachelor party over the weekend, 19 guys, most of them not Michigan fans. And it wasn't much of a plan Saturday morning, people getting up late. It was a late night. I throw on the big TV, the Team USA, U19, and, didn't mention why I was watching, but got a chance to educate people on how good Morez Johnson was. Had a hell of a game, 10 points, 4 blocks, 7, 8 boards. So, yeah, it was fun to watch. He is going to be a stud and is already looking much better than he was at Illinois. So the front court is going to be outstanding, but it's going to be tough for these coaches to make decisions on who's going to play and who's not. how much guys are going to play, how much they're going to have to sacrifice. So as long as everyone's bought in, you got to feel good about what those decisions end up being, because there are a lot of good options and combinations they're going to have.
If I have to shoot from the hip and name a starting five, it's probably it's Cadeau, Burnett, Roddy Gale, Yaxel, Merez Johnson. But I think the center, they'll probably, there'll be times where they play together. There'll be times where they probably adjust, matchup dependent, who starts, things like that. I will make one prediction though. Maybe it might not even be a hot take, but this is the prediction. One of Namari Burnett or Roddy Gale will not be a starter when they get to the NCAA tournament.
Who replaces
lost Chris?
Oh, yeah. Where'd he go?
I don't know.
That's interesting. So one of them struggles, or
no? I think one very young person is going to play very well and work his way into the lineup.
McKinney or Grady?
It's McKinney. It's Trey McKinney. I just think he's a stud.
Yeah, I could see it. It probably wouldn't mean great things for one of Roddy or Namari in terms of injury or struggles. But either way, I think that Trey McKinney can earn some minutes. Winters Grady can earn some minutes at that kind of guard wing spot. It'll be interesting to see what that rotation ends up being, because there are a ton of options. And sometimes when Cadeau's off the floor, then some of them slide up to the 1, or you play a little bit smaller. I mean, Roddy Gale could legitimately play 1 through 4.
Holy crap. I didn't even mention LJ Kaysen too. That's how deep this team is.
Kaysen,
it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, Kaysen could end up being a starter too, depending on what kind of jump he makes.
So I'll make it even broader to hedge my bets. It will be one of Kaysen or McKinney. And it's because that guy will be playing really well.
Okay. So yeah, it'd be interesting.
Let's keep going. Hopefully we'll see what happens with Chris here.
He said he lost power.
Lost power. That's been going on around here. There are some storms whipping through the area, I think, at the moment. So we will keep rolling here. Let's take one from. I have to scroll a bit. We got a lot of there's a lot of tomfoolery and hijinks in the questions thread today. Let's go with this one from Kanga80. Kanga80 says, "What are your thoughts on the offensive line, especially given the new recruits, and are we getting the talent needed to continue to dominate the trenches?" We sort of hit on that in our state of the program part, but yes, I do. I think that on paper they're addressing that in a big way. And one of the most beautiful things in football, whether you're playing offensive or defensive line, and there's always going to be these high octane offenses. There's always going to be some new trend in the sport, but football boils down to, on both lines of scrimmage, moving the guy across from you somewhere he doesn't want to go or he's not trying to go. So if you've got premium talent on both sides of the ball there, that's almost a sure recipe as having the star quarterback. And if you have both of them, you're going to be really good.
Yeah, my thoughts on the offensive line for this coming season are completely different than they are for the long-term outlook, which is both good and bad, because I think that the O-line could struggle this year, especially early in the season. They have a lot to prove, even the guys that are coming back. Sometimes when you evaluate a team in the offseason and you go over who the quarterback is and, okay, what weapons does he have and what does the defense look like? How many sacks did this guy have? How many sacks did that guy have? How many pressures and interceptions on the back end and pass breakups and all these different metrics. And then for O-line, we just say, oh, they got 3 returning starters on the offensive line. It's like, oh, sweet. Like you just plug in a couple other guys and whatever. It's like, no, that was pretty subpar offensive line last year, returning, 3 players that probably weren't in the top 1 or 2 at the position group among their starters. So because you lost Miles Hinton and Josh Preeb on the left side of the line. So those guys have a lot to prove. They're recruiting incredibly well at the offensive line position. So for the future, because it does take time with that spot, including with Andrew Babalola and Ty Haywood, who came in the summer and has already looked good from what we've heard. It takes a little bit of time. So short term, big question marks. Long term, not as many, which makes you feel good. Again, if you want to line up the timeline with Bryce Underwood and some of the other talent you have on the team, you're looking pretty good for 26 and 27 and how that could shake out with not only what Underwood's going to be because he's going to develop through time, but also what will be around him, the infrastructure that's going to help him out, and guys in front of him that are going to keep him clean. That's exciting in the long term.
Yeah, I feel the same way in the long term. This year, I think the line's going to be better, but I could see it only being marginally better. I don't know what the upside is, how ready your young guys are able to come in and play, like a Babalola at left tackle. I know Ty Haywood was a blue chip guy, but you come in the summer, it's just super hard to crack the lineup early as a freshman when you don't arrive until fall camp. But I do think, Babalola gets all the shine. I think that Haywood has a chance to be good. I think Avery Gack in a couple years has a chance to be really good. And you throw that into, these guys that they're bringing in 26, and there'll always be guys if they need to patch via the transfer portal, they're going to try and do that best they can. But I'm with you. I like this line more for next season and 27 than I do this year, but I do think they have a chance to be marginally better this year. Let's go to. Well, do we want to take the SoCal one? There's a lot of he's throwing a lot at us here, so maybe we just go rapid fire. We'll take SoCal's though.
Oh, all those questions? Yeah, sure.
So I'll just fire them at you. Who wins in a fight, a Sasquatch or a Yeti?
I'll go Sasquatch. I'm more of a fan of Sasquatch 616, who's a member on our message board over at thewolverine.com. Use promo code UM1 over at the Wolverine.
I like Sasquatch. I think deep down he's a sweetheart, despite his rough exterior. But I do think a Yeti probably stuffs him in a locker. So sorry, buddy. Like, we love you. I hope that doesn't happen, but I like the Yeti's chances. Plus, Yeti keeps my drink cold too. SoCal says, how bad is MSU going to be this year? He says, hint, bad. If they find a way to win 6 games, I think that's probably a good season for them. But I just, outside of Childs and Marsh, there's just not a whole lot there for me to sink my teeth into, and even entertaining the idea that they could be anything more than a 6 or 7 win team.
I like the tight end, Jack Velling too. But
yeah, he's
so much of what they're going to be is dependent on what Aiden Childs becomes this season. The second year as a starter is when you take a really big jump generally, but only the good guys can take that jump, right? You can't be good without being good. Like, he's either going to stay kind of what he is, or he's going to prove that this was always going to happen. He was always going to develop and become a really good quarterback in the Big Ten. I don't know that there's a quarterback more important for his team in conference this year than Aiden Childs. He's not the best. They're not going to have the best team if he's good, but he could be the difference between 4 wins and 8 wins, 5 and 6, 7, 5 and 9, whatever it is. I wouldn't bet on the higher end of that, but there's a lot riding on what he can do. He can make some plays, but the consistency and I think the accuracy are both some issues, and some decision making as well. You think back to Boston College last year, Oregon, some really rough ones in the red zone, things like that. So how bad are they going to be? A lot of it has to do with how good Childs is going to be, but I'm like most people. I don't think Michigan State's going to be very good this year. I agree with you, Anthony. Like a bowl game's probably somewhat of a win for them.
I'm going to take one more from him because we do have a couple others I want to get to, but SoCal wants to know, why has Greek yogurt taken over when it sucks so much? Do you have a stance on Greek yogurt?
Not a big Greek yogurt guy, but I'm not against it. I've enjoyed it at times. I don't buy it though regularly. I don't know if that it's taken over. I didn't know that. So
we buy it here, but it's because it's versatile. Like, I can put Greek yogurt in a bowl and mix it with a tablespoon and a half of peanut butter, and mix that up and put some granola in it. And it's like, it almost kind of tastes like a dessert to me, but it's like supposedly good for me. You can also like add like seasonings to it, and then it becomes a dip. Like there's the tahini seasoning. There's some, a ranch season. Like, you can kind of turn it into a dip. And also you can make like pita bread out of Greek yogurt using like self-rising flour. Roll it out into sort of a tortilla, pan fry it. It's supposed to be better for you. So we don't do it often, but it is. I understand the hype behind it, but the hype is because it is versatile. If you're just saying, here, have this bowl of plain Greek yogurt, I would rather eat cardboard or anything else. But, it's more of a component of a better thing than it is, or a base for a better thing than it is straight up something that's good.
Is it kind of like an offensive line in a way where you need that to help out and accentuate some of the other strengths you may have on a team?
No, an offensive line is way more important.
More important, yeah.
Let's go to speak of the Squatch, and he will appear. Sasquatch 616. He says, in your time following Michigan, can you recall a better 2 weeks on the recruiting trail than what we've seen the last couple of weeks? Is there anything close? In terms of over the span of a couple of weeks, well, like you said earlier, I mean, you haven't seen him recruit like this since November of last year. So, no, this is pretty impressive. I can't, I know that the 2016 and 2017 classes were pretty good on paper. I don't remember like a stretch where guys were coming at this rate, though. The only thing that comes close is I feel like there was, and I have the ticket stub here somewhere. I was showing off ticket stubs last week, but there was a Michigan-Ohio State basketball game in 2012 where like a bunch of guys were there. Where like Jake Butt was there. Taco Charlton was there. It was like the bones of what the 2013 class was. I think those guys were all there for the most part, and a lot of them committed coming out of that weekend. That stands out, but in terms of over a couple of weeks, I can't remember anything that tops this.
Yeah, I think the end of last year's cycle was a little more spread out, to your point. So landing Bryce Underwood is bigger than a lot of runs that include, you could include 10 other commits in a 2-week span, and that run's probably not as good as landing Bryce Underwood on his own. But as far as like an actual blitz of commitments like this, I don't remember one since probably 2020, which was the 2021 class. There was kind of that. It was right around this time of year when they landed, I believe, like Junior Colson and a lot of those guys in that summer that made up the pretty legendary 2021 class. But I don't remember the exact sequence. But I do think that those were some really foundational pieces towards, I know that. I don't think that. But I think that was a 2-week stretch that included a lot of those foundational guys for some title teams. So we'll look back at that and and think about what they were able to do. And you hope you can do the same thing years from now, talking about this group that, oh yeah, Carter Meadows, and it was the Sherrone tweets and this and that. Like, if that materializes into championships, then this could easily be one of the better runs, because on paper, talent wise and stars wise, like this is right up there with anything I've ever seen in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and just by virtue of how recruiting works, there's going to be one of the top ranked guys in this class is probably not going to be very good, but someone, ranked in the 500s or the 600s, or, even just in the top 300, like someone there is going to be a foundational piece, because that's how it works. But, the more of these blue chip lotto tickets that you have, it's just a different caliber of guy with a higher odds of paying out, I would say. So the more of them you get, the better it is. It's a good place for them to be. We will move to this one.
Hold on real quick. Just looking back, Junior Colson and Rod Moore committed in a 2-week span. Keyshawn Bennett was also there. Tristan Bounds, who hasn't seen the field much, or hadn't seen the field much in that span, but it was highly rated. Let's see, Andrew Anthony later that summer. So there were some guys in kind of early summer of 2020 that committed, but this may top that for sure. Now that I'm looking at the number, just wanted to interject there, because I'm sure some people are going to fact check me and realize that it wasn't quite like this. There were only a few of those guys. This could be legendary here,
and it seems like it has a chance to go into. Would this be week 2 or week 3 at this point? Because they've been getting guys.
Yeah, this would be about. I think we're on day like 7 or 8 right now. So if they continue this through the 4th of July, we're looking at like a 2-week run. Yeah.
Obviously, listen to the recruiting show, watch the recruiting show tomorrow. They'll have more on all that stuff. But I think there's a couple guys set to announce pretty much every day through like the 4th or 5th. So buckle up. It's going to be fun. It's a fun time. And it guarantees nothing. But you'd rather have the class in hand than not. That's just how this works. So
it guarantees you a chance to be good. That's what it guarantees.
Yeah, and if the guys don't pan out, then it's a referendum on the staff, and you need to change staffs a couple years from now. Like that's what this boils down to. So that's the game you play. But good spot to be in the here and now. Tom Riddle wants to know: do you guys expect Chip Lindsey to be the OC for the duration of Underwood's career, going forward with the belief that he will be successful in Ann Arbor? Does he have the potential to be a target for OC vacancies in the NFL? We'll start with that one because he asked one about Wink too. Let's start with Chip Lindsey. He's worked at Auburn and he's worked for Todd Monken. He's worked alongside Gus Malzahn, but like this is a name brand college football job, and he's never had a quarterback with the talent that a guy like Bryce Underwood does. So he comes in now, and it's his system. It's his system. It's his tweaks. It's Michigan's offense. But when both of those guys come in at the same time, and that doesn't happen a lot, where you have a new offensive coordinator hire and a blue chip quarterback that you expect to start from day one, they do kind of get to build this from the ground up together. And that's exciting. I mean, what if this 3 years from now turns out where Bryce Underwood's a top, the top overall pick or a top 5 pick, and Michigan's offense is elite, and they're explosive. Could that lead to bigger things, whether it's as a head coach, whether it's as an NFL play caller? Absolutely, it could. It's impossible to predict right now, but it could. So the here now, like if we go by what the expectation for Bryce Underwood is, when you're the number 1 overall recruit, you don't run away from this. Like you expect those guys to only be here for 3 years. So do I think that Chip Lindsey can be here for 3 years? Absolutely. I think that not only do I think that is a possibility, I think it's pretty darn likely to happen unless in 2 years it blows up and he gets another opportunity.
Offensive coordinators, there seems to be a lot of turnover at that spot throughout football, whether it's college, NFL. You think of it, Jim Harbaugh's tenure here, it was really every 2-3 years. There was kind of a new one when you think of, Tim Drevno. Then they moved on. Pep Hamilton had a couple years in there. Josh Gaddis for 3. Sherrone Moore with Matt Weiss for a year. And then Sherrone Moore 1 year on his own. And then he becomes the head coach. So there is a lot of turnover. 3 years is a decently long time because, as you mentioned there and alluded to, it does open doors for you if you have success at this prominent of a position. But Michigan is also a great brand, and it's just every coach you talk to that has coached at Michigan, it's likely their favorite spot they've ever coached. So there's a lot of reason for guys to stay at Michigan as well. So I would bet on it, although the math would tell you there's a ton of turnover at that spot. But I think if Chip Lindsey does a really good job here, he's going to open doors, develop players, open doors for the other assistants that are on the staff, for the players to move on to the next level. And since he's going to have great players to work with, including Bryce Underwood, that's going to open doors for him. So if he ends up being a head coach candidate or a candidate for an OC job in the NFL, those are good problems to have if you're Michigan. It means you're doing something right. It was a great thing that NFL teams wanted Jim Harbaugh, that they had interest in him, even though it might have been annoying that your head coach was taking interviews. You would much rather be in that spot than, Vince Morrow was the, assistant coach for Kentucky, who was making, saying that no one should play for Michigan because their head coach is garnering interest from the NFL. Well, no one's garnering interest. No one's interested in the NFL in your head coach at Kentucky. And then, of course, Morrow shows his disloyalty by leaving for Louisville this offseason. But that's just one example. So if he does have those opportunities, it's a good thing for Michigan, regardless of whether or not he stays, because that they did a good job offensively, and then you can try to replace him if he leaves with somebody just as good or better.
again, it all kind of boils down to you'd rather have the opportunity than not have it. So they have an opportunity to build an offense from the ground up with a young quarterback where it'd probably be pretty meat and potatoes early on, and you get to grow with that together as you keep adding more talent and augmenting the roster. And it's kind of like it's sort of like a new coaching staff to a certain extent taking over in the NFL, where you draft a quarterback early and you're installing an offense and you're just looking for development each week. And if everyone just keeps getting better, everyone's going to benefit from that professionally one way or another. We're going to end on this one from Toomer33, who says, how damaging would it be if Greg Crippen goes down with an injury? And he loops that in by saying, other than the QB, is there a player on the roster we could least likely lose and play at a high level? And I had to think about it for a second, but it might be, and it just comes to like replacement level, the difference between the guy who starts to the guy who backs him up. Greg Crippen might be pretty darn close to the top of that list.
He could be. I think Brady Norton, as our Chris Ballas reported today, working at some center. I know he mentioned that on the podcast recently too. So building some options there. You could always move guys over from guard, but Crippen is a guy who has starting experience at a really important position in terms of chemistry on the offensive line. So I could get on board with something like that. You think it's really, as you mentioned, you think about the deepest position groups and you think about the least deep position groups. It'd be the ones that are, have the least amount of depth that you would go to. So quarterback, I think just in general, I think Bryce Underwood's going to be really good right away. So I think that there's quite a bit of separation there between him and who the next best guy is. And we know Mikey Keene has dealt with injury this offseason. So that places some concern there. Running back, you'd feel pretty comfortable with the next guy. But after that, you are looking at, not guys who haven't really taken snaps. I think Micah Kapana has one touch in his entire career so far last year as a freshman. So that would be a little bit of a concern. But it is an interesting question because injuries happen every single year. And now teams don't have as much depth as they used to. So an injury, depending on the position, could really kill you as a team. We saw it with some teams last year and when the breaks they got. So that's a good question. You hope it doesn't happen to anyone, and especially the most important positions on the field, given what you have built on the roster.
Yeah. Did you say Jair Hill in that?
No.
I think he would be another one that's close to the top of the list, whether it be injury or he doesn't play well, because I think he's the closest thing they have right now to a legit number one corner. And that doesn't mean that a guy like Zeke Berry can't be good and that Caleb Anderson can't come in and play or that Shamari Earls isn't ready. But I just think that he's the closest you've got to that guy at the moment.
That's a good call. Him or Zeke, I would have him even.
Okay. Well, that's it for us today. Hopefully Chris gets his power back. A little programming note. This is my last show for 2 weeks. I'm finally going on my honeymoon. We got married last fall. She's a teacher. I'm a primarily a football and basketball writer that travels for events. So we finally have a window to go. We'll be heading to Germany and the UK. So super excited for that. But I know it kind of falls in a time too, where obviously On3 and Rivals are merging together. That went through. All that takes effect at midnight. Just don't want people asking you guys like, hey, it's July 1 and the company's merged. Like, Anthony's gone. What happened? Like, I'm good.
No comment.
On my honeymoon. I'm not bringing a computer with me. I probably won't be on the board much, but I'm looking forward to it. And by the time I get back, it'll almost be time to rev the engines back up again. So excited for that. Just wanted to drop that in. And I don't drop a whole lot of personal notes on here, but if you're listening to this in the future, I am still employed. I am just elsewhere right now. So excited for that. 4th of July coming up. I'll get ahead of that right now too and say happy Independence Day to those of you who be on boats this weekend and celebrate and get some time with family. As the older I get, listen, I love games. I love sporting events. There's nothing better than that quality time. And if it's quality time at a sporting event, there's nothing better than that with families. So please take time to tend to your families and tend to yourself, and get some sunlight, get some sunshine out there. But yeah, that's my little diatribe here. You got anything else before we close out?
I can't follow that up. That's good.
Well, alrighty. I will talk to you guys in a few weeks. Be good, Chris and Clayton. You guys will have to hold things down here in the meantime, and they will. It's an exciting time to be a Michigan fan. Exciting time to follow recruiting, football, basketball, and more. Use that promo code UM1 for 2 months of access to our site for $1. If you're watching this on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to our channel so we show up in your feed more. If you want us to show up in your feed more, you got to subscribe to the channel, and it's right there. And you've got 2 seconds. I'm going to stall. I'm going to count to 3. You're going to do it right now. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Good. You're subscribed. So for Clayton Safey, for our producer Megan behind the scenes, for Chris Ballas, who is currently filling his house with candlelight, I'm Anthony Broom. We will talk to you guys again soon. Talk to you guys in a few weeks.